Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Heroes of the Hardwood, the series that pays tribute to the legends of the NBL. The subject of this program really needs no introduction. He is the greatest basketballer Australia has ever produced. You guessed it, Andrew Gaze. At the age of 18, Andrew embarked upon his professional career with his beloved Melbourne Tigers and took out Rookie of the Year honors. This, the first of many awards the versatile 6'7" guard would earn. He played college ball, he played in the NBA, and he represented his country at 5 Olympic Games and remains the all-time leading point scorer in NBL history. Without further introduction, may I present to you the story of Mr. Andrew Gaze.
Neither is Mark Gaze, so the Tigers have only used 8. Andrew Gaze, that was from the other bank of the Yarra.
Simmons, he says, give it to me a little bit higher. Gaze on the break, stops for 3. Nothing but net.
Tigers through Copeland, has lost control now. Gaze, 4 on the shot clock. Must get something happening. Not in time. Yes, it was, and it tumbles. Andrew Gaze with the play that is going to prevail for the Melbourne Tigers.
I remember down at Albert Park Stadium that Andrew Gaze was one of the biggest pests of all time. A little kid crawling around the court and we were trying to train or run training sessions, and to see that young boy grow into a young man and to grow into, I believe he is the greatest Australian basketballer that we've had.
He had the best playground of any kid in the world, not just locally, because it wasn't just basketball as his playground. There was badminton, table tennis, later on squash, sailing on the lake, golf, tennis, football, you name it. So from a parent's point of view, it was great for us because we always knew where our kids were.
The little cottage that we lived in was physically attached to the basketball stadium. So I'd go into the 9-court facility, and whether it was playing basketball or even playing footy, playing cricket, playing tennis, hanging out, everything was done in that facility.
A lot of Americans were being recruited for teaching stints in Australia for a couple of years, and many of those were outstanding basketball players or became outstanding coaches. And they would inevitably come to Albert Park and play and scrimmage or work at the high or compete at the highest level. And so Andrew, being in that environment, would be hearing stories from the likes of Brian Goorjian or Bruce Case or Doug Dodge and other players that played for us about their college experiences. And so I think that they were fairly influential in stimulating the imagination and establishing his basketball dreams.
When I was under 14s, I'd play in my team, the under 14s, but quite often the under 16s would be playing, and in the under 16 Cs, there's a player missing. Oh, can you help out? Oh, I'm jumping in there. And then after that, the under 18s would play, and then sometimes even the under 20s. So on any Friday night, I might play 3 or 4 games. Ken Watson was the one that I guess pushed me along. We got through to the finals, and we're playing in the finals, and we're up against Geelong, who were ranked a little bit higher than what we were. And we're playing this game, and we had a bit of an advantage. And in that team, there was Bruce Palmer, Alan Westover, Brian Goorjian.
Brian, who was our playmaker and ball handler, fouled out. And so Bruce Palmer was the other second guard, and he had the ball handling duties, and we were trying to nurse our lead, which was getting whittled away very rapidly as Bruce kept coughing up the ball. So Ken called on Andrew to come into the game at that stage. I mean, he'd been playing, but not an important role with the team, because he was only 15 at the time. And he took charge of the ball handling duties, and Bruce had his normal task, and we were able to win this final. So the repartee that went on after that between Bruce and Brian about who had the right skills and so forth, when we had to depend on the 15-year-old kid.
The pressure's on. Goorjian's fouled out, Westover's fouled out, Hugh Hope is all their top players. Now they got Gaze on the floor, and we're like, well, we're going to abuse him. Let's foul him, put him under pressure. And he's going to the free throw line, cashing in, you know.
I asked the coach of the national junior team who were the players at the recently completed World Championships that they thought would be appropriate for consideration for the selection of the national team. Andrew was the first choice of the junior coaches. Of course, whilst there were the inevitable accusations of nepotism for the 1984 Olympic team, that was wiped out instantly, and there's never been any suggestion of that ever since.
I felt pressure because, you know, I wanted to make the Olympic team. It was an opportunity to represent my country and fulfil a boyhood dream. So you have those pressures of, as any player would. Not for a minute did I ever think that I was going to get any more or any less help because my dad was the coach. For a variety of reasons, most of them politically, and spurred on by the unbelievable success that the club had throughout its history, it you know, had some difficulties getting acceptance or an invitation to be a part of the NBL when it was formed. And I guess it served its time. And in 1984 was our first year into the NBL. So 85, 86, 87 primarily, and to a certain extent 88 as well, were very much rebuilding years, and the club was really under pressure in order to make that transition from 100% ranked amateurs to somewhat professional. And it took us a lot of losing, you know, like maybe 5 or 6 games was our winningest season during that period of time, and we took our hits, you know, massive hits.
All of our players of that era would have received more by going to any other club in the league. But given that they were part of the family, and growing up, most of them from childhood, and sticking with it, that element of loyalty was both given and received. I think the history has shown that loyalty, when it's both given and received, is a pretty good characteristic.
Through my dad's contacts, with international contacts, we got invited to play in the Big East Conference. And our last game of that series of games was against Seton Hall University. And PJ Carlissimo, who was the coach of the team, he'd scouted us when we played against St John's and saw me play against St John's. And unfortunately, we lost that game against Seton Hall. But I had 50. I scored 50. And I also put up some big numbers against some of the other schools. And following the game, PJ came to me with the assistant coach of the team, John Carroll, and asked me if I would play that particular season. What happened was, the Seoul Olympics would have been in August or something like that. In 1988, they started the NBL season early. I think it was the end of January. So it'd all be finished by Seoul. And then in 89, it went back to its normal slot in start of April. So there's the college season fitted in perfectly, that I could go and play for Seton Hall in that one season, and I wouldn't miss any of the NBL season, or wouldn't miss any of my obligations or opportunities with the Australian team. And yeah, we were tipped to be one of the weaker teams in the Big East Conference. And I remember the first day of practice, and I'm looking around and I'm training, and we're coming off the Seoul Olympics where we finished 4th, our best ever performance in. And I'm looking around playing with these guys, and I'm thinking, man, I've heard a lot about college basketball, I've seen a lot of it. If we're supposed to be that bad, this competition must be unbelievable, because these guys are great. They're great players. But we got through to the NCAA tournament, went all the way through the tournament, got to the championship game, and unfortunately lost in overtime in what is regarded as one of the all-time great games of college basketball, when Seton Hall lost to Michigan.
And the thing that impressed me that I've never ever forgotten was the response of the team in the rooms afterwards. I was very privileged in being allowed to come down to the rooms and meet with the players. None of the players, none of the coaching staff, the athletic director or anyone else on the staff at all made any comment at all about the call that decided the game. Their sportsmanship and their class was off the scale. Particularly the coach, PJ Carlissimo, and the athletic director. They set an example to me that I would only hope to be able to follow. We went back to Seton Hall a year or two later. Andrew couldn't play, but he was just coming off a pretty serious illness. Got a standing ovation that was embarrassing. You know, just went on for about 5 minutes. And so, that's not recorded here, but you know that lives in your memory forever, at the respect and the admiration that they had for Andrew.
Just a freak. That's the way I like to describe Andrew. I mean, he's a terrific bloke. He's just never changed in his attitude to life or basketball. He is the best scorer that I've ever seen. You can't stop him. He's just going to find a way to score on you.
The two best games I've ever seen Andrew Gaze back-to-back play was the 1990 Goodwill games. I think he had 50 against Puerto Rico and 50 against Italy, and this is before a three-point line. So it was amazing to watch him in action internationally. But he was deceptively one of the best athletes I think the league has ever seen. Footwork-wise, he was a maestro when it came to getting his feet and body in the right position to be on balance to shoot a shot. Real minor detail stuff that probably many people don't see.
What can you say about Andrew Gaze? I mean, seriously, he's the best basketball player that ever come from Australia. He's traveled the world and he's dominated in other parts of the world. You look at him and think, how old is this guy? But if you didn't respect him, he would tear you up. And Andrew was just as good without the ball. He was one of the best cutters without the ball and moving without the ball that the NBL has ever seen. And he could shoot that ball as he's legendary for. And I can remember one season we played Melbourne Tigers 3 times and Andrew Gaze averaged 45 for the season against us.
Skinny kid with a big head, tall, just goofy looking. I'm thinking gray-headed. I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute now. How old is this guy? I'm thinking to myself, and I'm thinking, I know he can shoot the ball, but can he play? But one of the best players I have ever played with in my entire life. That's no kidding. If I had to have I always said, I never tell him this, but he knows it. But if I had to have somebody in a foxhole with me in war, it'd be Andrew Gaze, because you know what he's going to give you every single time. I mean, I've seen this guy go through injuries, ankle sprains, punches to the eye, cuts. He still wants to be on that floor. And every single night he's coming to play.
Well, alley-oop! Gaze to Copeland!
Yeah, that alley-oop was something special. I mean, for me coming from America, it was done all the time. I mean, guys throw the ball up and you go up and catch it and you dunk it. But I think because the Tigers had never had anything like that, the fans just adapted to it straight away, and it was our signature play. We were in training one day. I think it might have been the first day of training that Andrew got there. And Andrew was just monkeying around with the ball, and he threw it up. And I went up and blocked it or slapped it out. And then the next time he shot it, I caught it and dunked it. And Lindsay was like, well, we got something here. Let's run this. And Lindsay, being the smart coach that he is, decided we can put this in the playbook.
That year was Leonard Copeland's first season with us, and he was a revelation for the competition. And we overcame also the Sydney Kings on their home court in the semi-final. Full stadium, the noise. I've never heard a basketball stadium with more noise. It was just an unbelievable game. But 92 was the year that we came very close. 92 we got to the grand final series against the South East Melbourne Magic and lost in a classic 3-game series. In the off-season, we've just thought if we could just pick up a big guy to fill the middle, one guy to put us over the edge, and we were fortunate enough that we picked up Mark Brecky, and to this day I have no idea how that good fortune smiled upon us. On the back page of the Age, they had Sibley, Dave Simmons, Leonard Copeland, Mark Brecky, and myself as like the awesome 5 of all time, picked to say, well, why are we even playing the season? This team's got, with this much talent, they're laid out of his ears, they're going to win, that type of thing. The hype, because we got Mark Brecky, was like, they've been to the championship without him, now they've got him. Why are we even playing these games? I think we might have been 1-5 to start the season, and the knives were out. Not enough balls, can't work together, all those types of things to say that, we're done. And back then, I think it was a 26-game regular season. when you've already played 6 games and you're that far behind, it's a long way to catch up. And fortunately for us, we got our season on track and went through.
Throughout the 1990s, the team the Wildcats wanted to beat the most was Melbourne. In the 80s, Melbourne didn't matter. They were easy beats. They were easy beats with one freak. As a journalist, you often have to ask players when you're writing for programs, the team you most love to beat. 80% of the Wildcats in the 1990s would have said Melbourne Tigers.
There was no way I could leave a job undone. I mean, 92, we were that close. And I said to my agent was like, look, do you want to stay? You want to try to get back in the league? I said, look, I can't leave now. You know, let's try to get this win next year. And it happened for us.
The other thing is it got the monkey off us back in regard to playing in Perth, because Perth felt that they were absolutely invincible. That the fact that we had won the first game at home wasn't really that serious for Perth, because we had never in our history ever beaten Perth in Perth.
And we went to Perth full of confidence. We almost got the second game in Perth. And, you know, that third game, I said to myself, there's no way I'm going to lose 2 grand finals in a row.
My feeling was after that second game that unless something went diabolically wrong with us, that those elements that caused us to lose the second game, corrected, should give us a pretty good chance of winning. And that's what happened. Although we had what could have been and should have been a winning margin in the last couple of minutes, Perth were making some very valiant recovery plays.
Andrew Vlahoff took a shot that, to this day, I don't know how it did not go in. And I don't know, it was fate or somehow or other, because that sucker was in and it popped out. And I got the rebound, and they're trying to stop the clock, so immediately they fouled. And so we're 3 points up, and we've got to go to the other end. I've got to shoot a 1-and-1. I was that focused on the back of the ring, just picking my target. I took them, and boom, and I was able to make that one basket to give us the advantage.
And the Tigers, for the first time in history, have won the NBL title.
Well, super effort for the Melbourne Tigers. Great scenes of jubilation.
What a great game of basketball. What an advertisement for the NBL.
And I'd always joke to Andrew and the guys, and I'd say, you guys were terrible before I got here. And then Brackett would always say, but you never won it until I got here.
There was just a great sense of relief for me that at least on the resume there would be a national championship for those players who had, I think, thoroughly earned it, but many players also earn it but don't necessarily get it.
You think back of those terrible years where you just absolutely getting pounded and you're basically embarrassed, to now you've seen the other side where you reach the pinnacle for the first time. And I think for me also too, the opportunity to share that with your dad.
You know, it's always been a friendly rivalry against Andrew, and when you play and you want to be the best, you always want to play against the best because they bring out your best. And playing against Andrew, you knew you were going to be up for it every time, man, you know, because his teammates are looking for him on every backdoor cut. And if you try to sag back for the backdoor, he's going to hit a 3 in your face. So what do, mate? You just hold on for the ride, mate. Hope he has a bad night.
He actually is a very, very big man. And he's always been a successful basketball player in terms of he does the little 1%ers, those extra things. He used to back cut you or lead out. He would never let a defender rest, and any defender that thought he could, oh, Andrew's stopped, I'll just stop for a second, he'd be gone. He was perpetual motion and impossible to stop over any period of time, particularly in his that middle years of his career. You know, as in the younger days, you know, he didn't have a very good support cast, so he probably wasn't as good as what he could have been because you could focus on him. You could send an extra defender at him and leave one of those guys that was playing on those early Melbourne teams. In that middle period, when they had terrific lineups around him, that's when you saw him at his best. When he was surrounded by talent, because you just couldn't send 2-3 guys at him anymore, and he could just have his way with you.
Mark Brecky was with the Philadelphia 76ers. So we start the 97 year. Mark's not there the first few games because he's still on NBA duties. Jarvis Lang we had to get rid of because he could no longer play because of his injury, so he was cut, and it turns out we're 3-9. 3 wins.